Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome everyone here to the April 23rd, 2024 Monmouth Regional Chamber of Commerce ChamberCast. I want to thank Ralph Zucker and his team, the visionaries here at Bellworks. The work they're doing is fantastic. Things are booming down at Bellworks, so stop by and visit and come soon. We have a special guest. We're talking today about education and business, and we're going to talk about some fascinating information about modernizing education and where the key drivers are moving forward. And we are absolutely graced with the presence of Fairleigh Dickinson University President Michael Avaltroni. Thank you so much for being here today. Pleasure. Really appreciate it. So, it's interesting. A little earlier on, we were talking, and it's almost like we already did 2 podcasts. We just need, right?
You just pull the string and I start talking.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
There's so much to cover, and we're gonna dive right into it. It's interesting. I was going through the resume. Now I would need AI to hallucinate for me, to add a few things, but so many different things. As the 9th president of Fairleigh Dickinson University, also a graduate of Fairleigh Dickinson University, holder of 10 patents that are involved in 2 biotech companies, had so many different things you could have done. And went in different directions, and then chose the path that you're on, which is changing generational learners. So we're going to talk about a few different things today. But if we can first, Jeannie, can we go around the room so folks can share who they are? And by the way, I should say, Monmouth Regional Chamber of Commerce folks, you're looking at the kind of companies that are behind the Monmouth Regional Chamber of Commerce. Get involved, join the chamber, and participate in so many different activities they have each and every month. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Morning, everyone. My name is Isa Bangura. It's my first time attending this event. I am the co-owner of A Place at Home in Eatontown, winning home care space. Good meeting you all.
Thank you.
Just introduce.
Thank you.
Jill Perez, Tranquil Teachings.
Good morning, Howard Stein, owner, operator of Home Helpers.
Therese Rolke, Executive Director of this great chamber.
Yes, this great chamber that does about how many events a month?
Oh my gosh, 10 to 12 events a month.
That's great. Thank you.
Hi, Teresa Marsh, CSAV Systems.
David Baratucci. I'm a financial planner, and this is also my first event here.
Welcome, welcome.
Kara Badger, Northeast Financial Network.
Azita Asa, parent of a high schooler, interested.
Thank you.
Paul Thurston of T Marketing.
Laura Ansi, Director of Communications at Brookdale Community College.
Good morning. My name is Dorothea. I'm the owner of Zando Financial, a full-service female-owned financial planning firm, and I'm also the co-founder of the Victor Zando Foundation, a local Monmouth County nonprofit.
Thank you.
Vicki Allen. This is my first time here as well. I'm the Director of Annual Giving for the YMCA of Greater Monmouth County.
Welcome.
Good morning, Jared Logan, Go for Hire. We offer career services and staffing for local businesses.
Good morning, I'm Angela Ashley. I'm with the Jewish Home for Nursing and Rehabilitation in Freehold.
Anju Puri. By background, I am in finance. I'm a life coach and also leadership facilitator.
Thank you.
I'm Gabriella Manning. I'm a student at Homedale High School.
I'm Zia Nazir, and I'm a student at Homedale High School, too.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. This is Christian from a Shared Universe podcast. Thank you for being here today. And my name is Jeannie Wall, and I'm the owner of Tap Into, a local news publication publishing in Monmouth County for Homedale, Colts Neck, Middletown, Hazlitt, Keyport, and most of the towns I have readers in Monmouth County. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I hear backgrounds in finance, financial planning, healthcare. We're going to be talking about these issues today. Again, my name is Terrence Wall. I'm the humble facilitator and honored to be the host here. My background's in public sector administration, as well as serving as president of the Homedale Board of Education this year and serving previously for 9 years on the Homedale Township Committee. So the public-private partnerships are so important and so intriguing. I asked ChatGPT to help me a little bit earlier because I wanted to share with you a couple of brief points, and I want to hand it over to the doctor. He was appointed the 9th president of Fairleigh Dickinson University on April 26, 2023. Previously served as the interim president. FDU graduate with a BS in chemistry, a master's, and Ph.D. in chemistry from Princeton University. Involved in research focused on surface science and titanium material modification for biomedical devices. That's a very big pill to swallow. So we're going to learn a little bit about that today. It played key roles in establishing the School of Pharmacy and Health Sciences at Fairleigh Dickinson, appointing University Provost and Senior VP for Academic Affairs in January 2022, and led the development of strategic plan FDU Will Soar, where they raised $90 million when they're planning on budgeting a raise of about $75 million, if I recall correctly. Successfully concluded that capital campaign, recognized as an ROI influencer, higher education power list, and NJ Biz Education Power 50, named to Innovate New Jersey's Innovate 100 list, received numerous awards from various publications for his contributions to education in healthcare. Doctor, thank you so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure, and I'm going to take you around with me. I think I like a hype man. That's good.
I'm your guy. I'm your guy. So we were speaking earlier, just talking about key messages and different things, and boy, we really ran the gamut. So let's just start here locally. You're known as one of the leaders in seeking to modernize the education systems and take advantage of the what's happening as far as the online learning and the hybrid, but with an emphasis on folks being together and collaborating in person. Can you speak to that a little bit, and particularly about your BellWorks partnership?
Sure.
Right off the bat.
Be happy to. So one of the things we realized very early on in sort of taking a look at what was going on in higher education, first and foremost, the current model's broken. I don't think that's any secret. You see it every day in the headlines. Affordability is an issue. The realities of the changing dynamics of the world and what college is for students and what college is for our communities is looking very different. And so one of the things that I was excited about in stepping into this role was really thinking about how do we adapt for a future that's changing before our very eyes. One of the things that we saw as a trend line, no secret, is that there's been this push towards online education, which I think will continue to push and continue to evolve. But for many people, online education leaves them behind. Obviously, a lot of people, it's great. And I think when you can use it and leverage it to get what you need out of your degree and out of the credential, I think it's wonderful to be able to do that. We had no aspirations to compete in that space because, frankly, a school like Southern New Hampshire, where you see Super Bowl commercials and other things, has a marketing budget that's probably larger than our university's budget. So we're not going to go toe-to-toe with them and say we're going to put Southern New Hampshire out of business, nor do we have any aspirations. But one of the things we've heard with great regularity from students, particularly in the online world, is the fact that they feel devoid of any contact or communication with others, right? Part of it is to engaging in message boards and chat rooms and other things with kind of a faceless crowd. The thing we heard in particular with a lot of folks who are desiring to go back to school to re-credential or upskill was that they desired actually being part of a community of learners. And so we began to explore how we could do this strategically to leverage some of the biggest barriers that we oftentimes hear, which students to be will oftentimes lead away from enrolling or re-engaging. And one of the things we heard very clearly was that there was a major problem with flexibility around life. And there was a major problem with re-embarking upon a college campus journey, meaning I'm 40-something years old. I don't want to be going and fighting for a parking spot. I don't want to be trying to find the bookstore and my building. So we started to come up with the concept of what if we focused ourselves on really being community-based in some of our programming. And that's what was the nucleus of this partnership with BellWorks, to begin thinking about how we offer programming addressing some of those biggest needs. We know that there's an opportunity for flexibility if we are able to actually deliver the programming on demand, on site at BellWorks, meaning that it allows people to come out of their day of work and go one day a week downstairs to the conference room to actually engage in a cohort-based model of learning where they sit with a faculty member and there's a curated evening of education around a subject. We've built the program so that it is, in essence, going to be catered to the audiences, meaning that we're listening to and hearing from the local community here about what their needs are. We think that one of the needs is likely going to be an MBA, which will likely launch this fall because an MBA aligned with the workforce of Monmouth County and of this building and beyond seems to make sense. But early on, we started to hear from some of the feedback from tenants and from partners, and we started to hear that things like a certified financial planner certificate program was something that was of interest, which could be delivered very much in a flexible arrangement on site with some components online where you can do things like lecturing or other types of learning. And then that one night a week cadence of in-person learning to gather the group and engage them. And so we embarked upon this. It dovetailed so nicely with engaging with and talking with Ralph Zucker, his mission to create this community here in Monmouth County in Homedale. And it just seemed to make sense, so much so that we kind of were almost in many cases riffing off of one another about the future. And when we saw that opportunity, it just made sense. And so we're embarking upon the journey and sort of in some cases seeing where it takes us.
And so what you're doing is you're meeting the student where they are, right?
Yes, in time, in place, and in life.
Yeah.
I think all of those.
Yeah, and also the partnerships. We have students here from Homedale High School. You have a partnership with Homedale. You have a partnership with the high schools across the county. Can you speak to that a little bit? And then how the businesses that are here, it's really business incubators that they could, their own staff, their own existing, for cross-training purposes, you're meeting them right here.
Yeah. It's an excellent point. One of the things I've said as I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of different audiences over the past year in this role, if higher education cannot adapt to become part of an ecosystem, higher education will fail. The days of us standing alone and charging $50,000 a year for tuition, which actually we're on the lower side of that. You may have seen the headlines where $100,000 is the creeping point of tuition right now for some schools in the U.S. If that continues to be the story and we think we're going to stand on our own and continue to raise tuition to the point where we can cover our costs and be successful, we're in trouble.
Go ahead.
So the reality for us is that the ecosystem we have to build has to start in the K-12 system in high school. It has to be with our 2-year partners at like Brookdale Community College, which we are in the process of burgeoning a relationship with us and with employers so that we have this seamless integration where students can start early on. And it almost in some cases can continue to be a true lifelong journey for them as they go. In some cases, continuous, and in some cases, non-continuous.
Now, you mentioned Brookdale Community College, one of the most fantastic community colleges in the country by rankings, and David Stout, who's a preeminent leader in that space. You know, David, the interaction with a Fairleigh Dickinson University and a Brookdale, how does that take shape, and how does it interact also with high schools where you can bring your credits up?
So one of the things I was describing to a couple of folks I was just speaking to a little while ago, David and I hit it off immediately, actually back when I was dean of pharmacy, because there are a lot of health science programs at Brookdale, and we started to build partnerships around those. The reason we hit it off immediately is because we saw the world the same way, which was that something has to give if we're going to continue to be viable as an entity, meaning that higher education continues to be an important gateway for students, but it can only continue to operate that way if it adapts to the times. And I think the opportunity to really engage with Brookdale in many cases is going to be focused around career-based programming, where we begin in the high school, where Brookdale has a very strong foothold with a lot of dual enroll programs to give students the opportunity, if they choose to do so, to get a head start, to complete their 2-year degree at Brookdale Community College, and then to seamlessly pipeline without time lost into a 4-year institution like ours. And in some cases, we've built it so that not only the bachelor's degree can be completed, but the master's degree completed with an additional year. So you actually have students getting to the point where they graduate before their peers with a master's degree, with less debt, with less time invested, and with a greater focus on a career-based field that will likely set them up very well for the time ahead.
So for the folks that are listening, you may not have thought you were going to start hearing about the modernization of higher education, right? You've already discussed being on the cutting edge of partnerships with the community college model. We're in with the most incredible ecosystem for businesses in the country, right here in Bellworks, the vision of Ralph Zucker and his team at Inspired. And that's the interface with the business organizations and with education. But you also mentioned the health sciences. Is that also the next part of the journey of hospital organizations that have, as you know, in the marketplace, there's such a need for quality, trained, professional, educated health science professionals. Does that fall into in future planning for Fairleigh Dickinson University as well?
It does. We believe that actually there's a tremendous opportunity for us to make a significant inroads into addressing what I would argue is probably going to be one of our biggest public health crises forthcoming that we can envision, which is the tremendous shortage of workforce, right? You hear it everywhere you go that we can't find enough healthcare practitioners at every level, from the entry level all the way up to the most senior levels. And this is going to become a crisis that's going to need to be addressed with immediacy, because frankly, you see the post-COVID retirement and exodus of people who are kind of at the point of either exiting the space or in some cases just no longer being able to do the patient care that they were doing day in and day out for years because of the emotional toll it took. And then you see the greater and greater demands of an aging population, a population that has more healthcare needs. We need to address this. And we feel like education is integral to this role, but it needs to be a smarter journey to education. It can't be us waiting for students to select. It needs to be us going out and finding opportunities for students, both the traditional age, traditional path student at 18 years old who wants a career in healthcare, but also for that mid-career person who's rethinking where they are, or maybe assessing the signs of the times and looking at the future of AI displacing their role or their career trajectory and wanting to retool or retrain. Or the most important thing, we have such a dynamic workforce of what I would call entry-level practitioners, people who are certified nursing assistants, people who are home health aides, people who are pharmacy technicians, who are wonderful at patient care, but often aren't credentialed right now through education to be able to get to the point where they can rise to that next level of nursing leadership or elsewhere. So we have to think about how do we educate in a sort of learn while you earn philosophy, where we actually partner with the two-year institutions, with our institution, with healthcare providers across the state, and do this in, again, an ecosystem style where students who are embedded working right now are working their way up to their next credential and doing so in a seamless fashion, and doing so while it's being paid for, while they're continuing to not have to drop everything and stop their earning potential, because life doesn't stop just because you want to go back to school, and doing it in a way where we have a strategy around it to assure that we're addressing this need.
And well, thank you for that. And you're talking about ways within which folks can mitigate the cost of education. But let me bring it back, because most parents and students don't have the opportunity to ask a question to the president of Fairleigh Dickinson University. So I'm going to ask a question that many people have, this riddle of whether or not is it worth it anymore? How do I pay for it? Am I getting value out of it? There's, as you know, there are trends of conversations that say it's just not worth it. I'm not getting value. How do I pay for it? And the federal government, as most know, they're dropping loans off the back of a pickup truck. Whatever you want, and it goes out to the future. And folks are debt ridden for decades in many cases. Speak to that question of I'm not seeing the value anymore. Help them understand where the trajectory and why that is a false narrative, perhaps.
Yeah. It is a false narrative, but it's an understandable false narrative. So what I would say is the evidence is out there that demonstrates, in fact, that a college degree is still a gateway to much higher earning potential throughout the lifespan. I think there was a recent study put out by the Blaustein Institute at Rutgers that demonstrates that over the lifespan of a New Jersey resident, using, by the way, tax records, so it's not anecdotal, it's actual data from earning, that I believe a college degree gets you an earning potential over the lifespan in New Jersey of about 1.5 or 1.6 million additional dollars earned. So even if you spent $160,000, you have a 10x return. The challenge is that's lifespan and your payment is monthly, right? So there's this issue of I see this thing coming that's a mortgage payment every month and it's not going away. And you hear anecdotally from people who are starting to experience the challenges of, frankly, starting their life because they're carrying around this burden of debt. And their entry-level job is an entry-level job that doesn't pay nearly enough to address that core issue. One of the things I think we have to do is we have to create more educated college consumers. One of the things that I find is always the most frustrating is that I hear anecdotally all the time from high school guidance counselors and others who are counseling students to try and get sort of to the most prestigious institutions, because it's sort of a boasting point for the high school, right? And that's fine, except for the fact that I don't always know that the best fit for a student is the one that looks the fanciest from the wall of penance in the guidance counselor's office or on the high school wall. I think part of it is understanding what is the purpose of what you want out of your high school journey. How do you make it work for you? And frankly, how do you afford it by using and leveraging all of the things that you can leverage that aren't debt-based, right? Meaning there's a plenty of scholarship aid that's going around at many institutions. There's plenty of grants and other types of scholarships that are out there. And then there needs to be a greater strategy of focus on the things we've been talking about, which is utilizing employers to be able to pay for the workforce that they need while they bring them along in this sort of curated fashion up the career mobility ladder. So all of these things are critically important, but it does require us to rethink, frankly, what I've said all along. My biggest fear isn't the data that does in fact suggest that a college degree is worth it. It's fighting the narrative that's out there that we're never going to be able to fight. Because me showing a graph that says, look, $1.6 million over the lifespan is not going to be the winning argument. The winning argument is what everybody right now is saying, which is this thing is a boondoggle, and we need to change that narrative and fast.
Well, that's part of what we're doing right here. Now, FDU has an interesting story. 1942, Dr. Sammartino and his wife Sylvia, correct, started the institution. For folks that aren't as familiar with FDU, can you give some key data points for folks that are? Tell me a little bit more about FDU.
Sure. I'd be happy to. So we are an interesting institution in that we are very, very diverse in every way. We have 2 campuses in New Jersey, but 4 campuses overall. Our 2 campuses in New Jersey, one is in Teaneck, Hackensack, both spanning both sides of the Hackensack River. The other one in Florham Park, Madison, and Morris County on a Vanderbilt estate and 185 acres surrounding it. Very, very different look and feel for the 2 campuses in New Jersey. And then we have a study abroad campus largely in Roxton, England, about 90 minutes from London. And then we have a campus in Vancouver, British Columbia that was started about 15 years ago and grew from 17 students 15 years ago to 1,300 students now, almost all of them international students seeking an American degree in Canada for the purposes of advanced fast track of immigration, because the Canadian workforce needs are such that they don't have enough workforce domestically and need to seek international opportunities. So those 4 campuses sort of make up the core. We have always been mission focused on creating opportunity for students by truly meeting students where they are. That was the very founding mission. In fact, Peter Sammartino cited his desire for us to be a community college, not in the sense that we know it now, but a college of and for the communities it serves. So it's great when we bring back and talk about these new opportunities that they aren't new at all. They harken back to the original mission of the institution, revamped and re-enveloped in a new way for a new day.
And you talked a little bit earlier prior to us going live about the value of college education and how in certain institutions you're like, for example, Ivy League they're generally on a path to do very well. They're going through their education system and having a result that is in some ways anticipated and or expected. And the difference of folks who hadn't necessarily planned on going or weren't sure, or even with the ESL and the language barriers, folks that weren't quite sure that they were going to accomplish that as a first-generation college graduate. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And to be clear, I think the world of what Princeton does, I am an alum. I'm very proud of that. But Princeton takes for its undergraduates the valedictorian from every high school in America and produces brilliant graduates, right? I think that's a wonderful thing to do. But I would argue that it's not the hardest thing in the world to do. Institutions like ours, we pride ourselves on the fact that the story we hear more often than not is from students who say, I didn't know that college was something I could achieve, was something I could do, was something that I could find my way through. And 4 years later, when they're walking the stage at graduation with an opportunity to truly change their trajectory and the trajectory of their entire family, the impact is so much greater because the story is so much different. the thing we always talk about, and it's with great regularity we hear this, particularly for a first generation student who may be coming as a new immigrant or may be coming first generation in the US as well. We hear that when we educate that student, we change 3 generations' narratives, right? We change the student's narrative, of course, with the opportunity to go through things that a college education would provide, their children and their family unit that they bring into the world and the opportunities that they'll have. But more often than not, these are students that are supporting their family unit and their parents and elevating their lot in life as well. So the impact in institutions like ours, who are really serving, in many cases, a much more public mission, provide an opportunity for us to really, when we get it right, to have these stories that get told to us about the impact that students' lives are changed within, to really kind of resonate to what we do, having great meaning and great impact for our communities and for individuals' lives as well.
Thank you for that. And going a little further into that, there's some families and some folks who simply think they can't. They simply cannot, particularly in the neurodiverse field, where they believe that the complications of getting to that place and succeeding at that level is beyond their reach. Can you share your views and how it's quite the opposite and very well within their reach, within the scope of what FDU is accomplishing now?
Sure. I'd be happy to. So it's interesting because we've had legacy programs that most people, I always say, don't know about unless you're a parent of someone who has got a learning difference, who is neurodivergent. And there are these underground, if you will, networks. When I say underground, I don't mean secret, but I mean not in the college brochures, right? That parents of students who are neurodiverse or who have a learning difference tell others. And so we've had a long history, in fact, 40 years of what we call our regional center for students with learning differences who actually are educated with additional supports to be able to navigate college in the challenging environment that sometimes they find by needing extra time for exams, extra support and extra study and extra help. About 20 years ago, when we saw the changing dynamics of greater numbers of students coming to college who were neurodivergent, who were presenting on the autism spectrum, we created a program, still a smaller program called Compass, which actually helps students who are oftentimes very able to navigate the college classroom, but struggle more with the social aspects of the college campus, to be able to navigate that with additional programming and support. And those are some of our greatest successes, because these are students that are often, frankly, overlooked in the college journey because they are not, quote unquote, traditional in the sense of what a high school would see as students who were college ready and ready to jump in to the college curriculum. But we've seen quite the contrary, that these are some of our best success stories, as long as we provide the adequate levels of necessary support and the necessary pathway for them to assure that they have what they need to be successful.
And technology plays a big part in that, I'm sure.
A very big part, and a growing part each year, because we realize there's so much more abundantly that we can provide now than we could even a decade ago.
Yeah. I'd like to briefly talk about technology in terms of whether it's a tool or a travesty. We talked a little bit earlier about the lack of communication and the disintermediation, if you would, for the next generation, where their faces are buried in a phone, even adults, frankly, and the dopamine effect of that, and how it just really, it's disconnecting rather than connecting. Can you speak a little bit about the tech as a tool, and perhaps AI, if you'd like to speak to that space
sure.
a little bit, but the areas of concern that folks should be thinking about from your background with an audience that is looking for guidance, frankly, on things that are so new they can't keep up?
Yeah, this is become a time that I think most of us never thought we would live within, right? It's sort of one of these futuristic cartoons that seems to be playing out in real life. It is both a tool and a terror, right? And I say both because I think in any given day, I think technology and all of what we have access to is the most amazing part of being a member of society in 2024. And it's one of the most horrible realities that we find ourselves sort of trying to tread water against. First thing I will say, I was actually recently, a couple of weeks ago, at a healthcare conference around healthcare technology. And the advent and notion that AI is coming is a misnomer. AI is here, and it's being deployed right now in real time in decision making, and it's just sort of the surface being scratched. I think one of the things we have to acknowledge is it's not going away. So we need to figure out how to live with it and how to integrate it to be used in a way that we can benefit from. But the days, and I hear it on a college campus, you hear two schools of thought. One is, let's teach students how to navigate AI and how to use it for a strength and a tool. And then the other mindset of, we need everybody to go back to the old blue books to start writing exams in a blue book so we know it's their own work, right? That second argument is probably burying your head in the sand, because there's no future for us if we require everybody to handwrite everything, because we're not going back to that. But I do think we have to own up to the fact that AI, we need to figure out how to integrate it and use it in a way that it becomes a tool for good in our classrooms and in our schools, in the K-12 and in the higher ed space, so that it doesn't get sort of unpoliced and become just a shortcut for students and a tool for laziness and a tool, frankly, for misinformation. Social media is a whole different argument. I would argue that we are a crisis that's already here, but is burgeoning worse and worse by the day. The statistics on college campuses and K-12 schools around student mental health are disturbing. 1 out of every 4 students is depressed. 1 out of every 3 students presents with anxiety. All sorts of mood and social anxiety disorders presenting. 1 out of every 9 college females is contemplating or facing suicidal ideation. Those are the statistics on a college campus. As the university president, I see incident reports and student transfers to hospitals and other things happening with a regularity that scares me, not just as a college administrator, but more so as a parent. There is a reality that we are not well as a generation, and I think a lot of it is the result of being immersed in technology that creates a false sense of euphoria and a false sense of reality for each one of us. And I think fragile young minds see a much greater presentation of the challenges of navigating this. But already, and you all experience it if you're out in that world at all, that there's this sort of dopamine rush from getting liked or getting followed or in some way seeing something you agree with that continues in a young person to build their identity in a very, very false and fragile way. So one of the things I've said, and I don't believe that this is the sole purpose of a university, but I do think one of the things that we're seeing is that in the advent of so much information on demand for students, the days where I'm the sage on the stage that's going to teach you what you need to know are gone, because you can Google it faster than I could say it. Much of what we need to think about is that we need to, as a university, prepare students to become functional, contributing adults, because when they come to us, they aren't more often than not. And that's the result of, I think, a lot of things that are happening that are driven by the fact that we're creating this false world for ourselves and for our children that I don't think is easily navigable, has no rules, and fundamentally is breaking a lot of people down. And we better address it fast, because the crisis is getting out of hand. It's getting worse by the year. And one of the things that goes back to that shortage of providers that we talked about before, there aren't enough mental health support professionals out there to provide the support that we need for the people who are presenting with great need.
Thank you for that. And at the risk of it being a somewhat loaded question, would there be any guidance or thought or that you would share to local boards of education in the K-12 space and how to address these kinds of things? I mean, I have my own views as far as removing cell phones and things of that nature. But would there be any contours that you would suggest from your experience and training to guide volunteer board members in the policy side of in that very, very important early year education?
Somehow, and I don't profess to have the answer to this because this is the most difficult thing I think we struggle with. Somehow we have to build real community amongst young people, and frankly, amongst all of us, because the communities we've built are built on falsehoods, right? In a sense that most of them are virtual, and most of them require everybody sort of buried in a device to find their people. And you're seeing it, you're seeing it in every facet. You're even seeing it in the world of dating and relationships, that most people don't know how to meet people, whether it's to meet their future spouse, whether it's to meet people for networking or others. And it's a struggle, I'll be honest with, even I myself struggle with, and I wasn't born of this generation. So somehow we have to foster more organic communities. It's one of the things that we were really passionate about in doing here, in not going fully online with our programming. We've heard more often than not just from adult learners, but from all students, the things they love most are engaging with their peers, not necessarily with a faculty member, even if it's just the silly stuff like, I hate this class, right? It's that dialogue of commonality and shared experience that we're somehow missing. And I don't think it's an impossibility. And we were talking about this before. You know, I use the anecdote that we talk with great regularity about the fact that we're a soundbite society, right? That we're trapped in this. Everybody can only have an attention span of 15 seconds. You got to hit them quickly. And that's true. And I feel it myself when I'm scrolling through and I get bored 8 seconds in if you haven't captured me. But I use the analogy that one of the biggest growth areas in media is around podcasting. And if you think about that, that's completely antithetical to what we talk about as a soundbite society, because podcasting is long form media. It's an hour of dialogue with someone, yet people will, on their commute, engage for an hour listening to someone, whether it's, you know, media in the sort of traditional sense of a lay media, or whether it's a specific technical media. That tells me that people are hungry for dialogue and interaction, but they're not getting it. So we need to create that in our schools. We need to create that in our communities, and we need to somehow create that organically without using technology, because I think we fall back on the device and oftentimes lose the narrative.
You're exactly right, but we probably ought to let them know that we're holograms. It's this new.
I wish it was that easy. I could commute. Yeah, my commute would be shorter every day.
I do want to share with you. I've been pushing for hologram technology as basically even as a test, even the STEM curriculum. I've seen what University of London has done. University, the Business School in Austin, Texas. Can you briefly speak to that space, if you're to the extent that you're involved in it? Because what I see is, like, I'll give you an example. Italian 4. You're not going to have a sub for that. Latin 3, you're not going to have biochemical engineering. You're not going to have a sub readily available for that. But if you're able to have contracts with third-party providers anywhere in the world, where for example, you know, Claudio in Milan beams in from his green room, and the students, and you have that technology with a HoloLens, Azure, whatever the technology may be, is that something that you see as far as a modernization or that kind of technology? Where do you see in the classroom of the future? What might that look like to you?
So it's interesting because at this healthcare conference I alluded to being at a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that they had was a virtual provider. Now, they had it demonstrated on the trade floor, where the person was in one corner and the hologram was in the other corner, because they were demonstrating it. But they had this real-time interaction with a healthcare provider as a hologram, interacting with patients surrounding. Now, obviously, you can't do physical assessment that way because the technology wouldn't allow it, but that interaction of face-to-face in 3 dimensions with a perfect rendering image, it was there and it exists. And I think in healthcare, particularly for rural communities or other places, you would be able to deploy this. Similarly, in the K-12 or in the higher education space, I do think that this is the future. It's going to be a challenging future because it's going to lead to a significant workforce reduction. Because oftentimes, I think, rather than, as you alluded to, probably the very good way of deploying it for extension of places where you have shortages, I think there's going to come a point in time where you're going to have a model where you're going to have curated experts who are all around the world, who are the people who are the expert in a given field, providing the overview lecture. And who wouldn't want to hear from a Nobel laureate on a topic in chemistry, or from some sort of a leading business expert in a program? And then the education, the follow-up, isn't necessarily a subject matter expert, but is just someone who is functioning more as a curator. I think for many, that will allow us opportunities to go places and close the distance gap. But I do think it will create the challenge of then what is the need for us to have on every college campus or in every or an instructor of subject X. Rather, we can bring in this person from around the world and then just curate the class with local talent.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is very fascinating, and it is here. I think that's one of the scary parts, is that we talk about the future as though it's eons or decades away, and it's not. It's months,
it's in
years.
front of us.
Yeah.
Tell me, what else inspires you in your role, professionally, in this space? Because you're involved in, there's 2 biotech companies that your technology has been in place with. We'd love to hear a little bit about that. And you focused on leading next generations and really building a world community of grads that can then it's almost like a force multiplier, isn't it? Of solid education. What else inspires you?
So, it's interesting because the biotech work that I did, when you go to graduate school, you get the opportunity to sort of vet who your graduate advisor will be. And a lot of people usually select on who the biggest name is or who's the most recognizable. I went in very much, as I sort of approach most things, I wanted something that I could articulate what I was doing to someone who was a non-chemist and they wouldn't fall asleep, right? That it was real world, it was practical, and it had an impact potentially for the sort of greater good beyond just being in a textbook or being in a publication somewhere. So the project I chose was actually around orthopedic devices and putting coatings on orthopedic devices to better integrate them into the body, because the biggest challenge around orthopedics is device failure. And oftentimes device failure comes as a result of the device having something on it, bacteria or some other contaminant, that causes it a failure when it's actually implanted into the body, which leads to revision, it leads to failure, it leads to a whole bunch of a cascade of events that are really bad, particularly in people who are often older if they're getting a hip or a knee, which then can cascade.
And the carrier not paying for the readmission.
And all of the all of the other issues, or paying for a cheap version the second go round, right? All of the burdens of that. So I really was excited by that, and we were very successful at doing that. In fact, so much so that these 2 companies spun off of the technology. One of them, coincidentally, 20 years after I finished the project, just last month ended up with FDA approval for the device that we worked on, which will now hopefully begin going to market before long.
Well, that's an applause line.
So that was exciting. Yeah, I did not see that as my wake up one morning and get an email from your old grad advisor saying that, but that was fun. But I sort of have always had the same mindset, which is that I like doing things, and I'm inspired by doing things that sort of change the norm, change the paradigm, and have very practical application. So in stepping into these roles, one of the things when I stepped into the role of, they asked me, do you want to consider building a school of pharmacy for us? I said, I don't know anything about pharmacy. I'll let you know. But as an outsider, I was able to take a look at things in a way that people who are inside the industry oftentimes just cowed down to saying, yeah, this is what we do here. This is what we've always done. And I feel like asking the question of why do we do it this way, and can we do it better? Can we change things, is an exciting thing for me. And in higher ed, it's a very rare thing. So stepping into this role now, it's another chance for us to be asking difficult questions at a very difficult time, but for a greater good, for our students and for generations to come, to have the benefits that a college education will bring without all of the burdens and negatives we hear about what college has become here and now.
Thank you. You're talking about some of the areas that concern you. What else keeps you up at night? The higher level thinking, the higher what keeps you up at night?
So I think within the realm of my professional world, what keeps me up at night is that higher education is so change and risk averse that trying to implement major wholesale change is very difficult. It's oftentimes met with a lot of, no, this is what we are, this is what we do. It's, this mindset of the students have to adapt to us, not the other way around, right? And what worries me is when you have that as the culture, it's very difficult to change. I remember going to a program run by, I think, Disney Institute, and they talked about the principle of the 20-60-20, that you've got 20% of your population that are on board with you and bought in, 20% that you're never going to win over and they're going to be an obstacle to everything, and the 60% is the moldable middle. My fear is that we need to somehow win over that 60% in an industry that oftentimes gravitates towards the 20% who are dug in to being change resistant at all costs. So I worry about our industry being able to change before it's too late and change is thrust upon us, and being able to take control of the necessary change. Akin to the analogy I oftentimes use is, if you know you need surgery, it's horrible, right? It's horrible for you. You know that's looming over you. but it's a lot better to go in for elective surgery, to choose the hospital you want, the physician you want, at the time you want, and the night before to go have a nice meal, versus being wheeled in on a gurney to the local emergency room saying this patient needs this now. And I think we're at this sort of culminating point where we want the former and not the latter, and I'm not sure our industry is ready for that.
Well, and I'll follow on to that, because you have a positive leadership model and you're trying to pull the others with you, right? And in challenge often is opportunity, right? So in your field, in your space, there's a incredible turnover in leadership with education and college presidencies and the higher order of structure. Is that both challenge and opportunity? Meaning, is the turnover a lack of stability, or is it actually is there a modernization? I'm throwing this out there. Is there a modernization going on that there's turnover because that mindset is not ready for what needs to happen? Can you dovetail those together, like the challenges in the leadership turnover in the education community, and does it tie to modernization?
It's an excellent question, because you're seeing that this is this ongoing headline of, college president X retires, steps down, goes back to the faculty. And I do think it's the result of, this reality that, so much of higher education leadership is born within, right? And it's this sort of culture that you grow up within that oftentimes becomes a part of your person. And then when the change is necessary, that change is oftentimes not well received. And I think a lot of people have realized maybe it's better for me to step away than for me to incorporate this into part of my journey. So I think for me, the excitement becomes, as you said, that within change comes opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I do think we're ripe for change, and those who are willing to accept it will have opportunities and open doors that maybe many others will not.
Well said. Earlier when we started, oftentimes towards the end, I'll say to folks, like, what's the next big thing? Your next big thing is right now, right here, right in Bellworks, right? Yes. And also the intersection that you already have with K through 12 in partnerships with districts like Homedale and other districts in the area. So folks can really scale their education earlier. And that also helps ameliorate the cost of a four-year education, correct?
Yes. That to me is one of the best parts. Is you hear now, in fact, I know of a number of schools in Monmouth County, but throughout the state, where they're building up to an associate's degree into the high school curriculum, right? So suddenly now you're giving this 2-year head start in time and money to students within the district. And all of a sudden the story has completely changed, because now conceivably for an institution like ours that has 5-year pathways to a bachelor's, master's combined degree, it's 3 years out the door with a master's degree, which means ultimately a student is 2 years ahead in time, 2 years ahead financially, and at a master's level before many of their peers are ready to graduate college. And that's a different story and a much better one to tell.
Yeah, and many parents aren't aware. If you want a sure way to reduce the cost of college education, a high school graduate with 2 degrees. High school degree,
yes,
and an associate's, right?
Yes, and I remember talking to David Stout from Brookdale about the fact that many of his students are walking the stage in the 2-year graduation with an associate's degree before they walk the stage that June with a high school diploma, because graduation is in May. So that's a story of success. Students actually getting what they need, not just to keep up, but to get ahead.
Thank you for that. Before we open it for questions, I wanted to ask you just to capture again some of the key areas of modernization that you're putting forward for the folks parents that are watching, university presidents that are watching, that they may not be asking the questions, but they want to learn and they want to figure out how to incorporate this into their own curriculum, their own leadership team. What are the 3 key items that you'd like to leave folks here today with, and the folks that are watching, because we're streaming live as well, that contemplate your view, your vision over the next several decades, the next generation of leadership and education?
I think that the take-home messages to me are that we need to change the narrative on college. We've gone from college at one point being the only answer for students, right? The mindset of, to be a success, you've got to go to college. I don't think that that's true. In fact, I think for many students, if they're interested in a vocation or interested in another path, they should explore that path. I think we've created a false narrative that the only way to quote unquote success is through college. But I think we've gone to a complete 180 to now saying college isn't worth it for anybody. College is this overpriced thing. It's a scam. That's not true either. So we need to find this balance to demonstrate the value of what we do and to demonstrate it to a new generation that has new wants, new needs, new desires, and frankly is part of a new and changing world. So I think that becomes the narrative we have to work towards. We have to do it through innovative new programs. We have to do it through innovative new partnerships. We have to do it through innovative new delivery methods and strategies for engaging our students. And we have to do it to think about how we serve students as the sort of lens of purpose of everything we do, rather than saying you've got to adapt to our products and our environment. And if you don't, then this is not a place for you. It's got to be turned around. And one of the things we've really focused ourselves on is saying our students come first. They're the center and the North Star of what we do. And making this journey a journey of success for them has to be our story in order for us to be successful.
Well said. You know, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we put together something for you here today. It's our first focus group with the Monmouth Regional Chamber of Commerce. We were talking before the podcast, talking about a feedback loop, because it's one thing you're putting something out, but how do you feel? What do you think? What would you revise? What would you incorporate, or what do you have concerns about? If we can open it up, and I'd like to, our two wonderful students that are here, I asked them a little bit earlier, so they're prepped. I said, think of some, like a good key question. Can you provide this university president some feedback? You're at Homedale High School, and a question that you may have, because we're going to open it up for a few questions. And also, if you want to give a feedback, we have folks from financial services. We have healthcare here. So if you can do that as well. So you have a university president right in front. So say hi, guys.
Hi. You were talking about the classes here in Bell Works. What would the cost look like?
So for right now, we currently have 2 potential programs that we're looking to launch, and then there will be more added as we sort of find out what the demand is. Our MBA is structured to have a significant reduction from this quote-unquote sticker price because it's a cohort-based program off campus. So it's structured to be, I believe, at about 70% of the list rate. So about, I think if I'm not mistaken, about $800 a credit at the master's level. Our certified financial program, planning program, is prepackaged as a priced sort of credential. And then undergraduate programs typically are offered, when we offer them off-site, at 2/3 of the original price tag. So usually about $667 a credit. So it's a significant reduction in pricing because we're essentially not providing the other piece, which is some of the campus services. And we're doing it in a cohort where there's an efficiency for us to be able to run at a better scale so we can do this in a more consolidated fashion. Frankly, it's one of the ways in which we start to address the concern around cost in higher education is we need to rethink models, because the problem, and it's sort of the misnomer, colleges are not getting rich off of college tuition. Actually, colleges are struggling to make budget because the cost is so inefficient and the model is so inefficient. So unless we change the model, the cost issue will continue to be there. And frankly, it'll be there at a terrible result for students and an equally terrible result for the university. So nobody wins.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was great. So I work with a lot of students and a lot of companies because I do, the career services and the staffing. I find so many companies are only looking for in-person work, but these students who are doing remote courses are only wanting to work remote. So I really, I appreciate that you guys are going above and beyond, building kind of the communities in person, because they're losing that touch and it's creating a divide between available jobs and what job seekers are comfortable with. So just some feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, it's excellent feedback. And it's one of the things, we've realized that the pendulum seems to continue to swing, right? We went from fully in person pre-COVID to fully online, and the expectation that employees were going to drive the demand and say, we're not coming back. And now companies have swung back and say, yes, you are coming back because we've got this leased space and you're in it, right? So we need to adapt appropriately and find a balance, because I don't think any of the extremes are going to be the winning hand.
And he's quite right. I'll just point out something briefly about being in person has a measurable impact. And learning loss was and continues to be a huge topic in New Jersey. I'll just share, Homedale was one of the first public schools to be back to in-person education. And there was a university study that indicated it was the only district that did not suffer learning loss from the pandemic, which I personally believe is wholly responsible for being in person back with their peers. Yes. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for speaking. I actually graduated last May. So I was wondering, unfortunately, I feel like there's a stigma with adult education students that want to get a higher education but might feel a little too nervous. What advice would you give those students?
It's an excellent point. We see it all the time, that I think that, the fears of students exist at every sort of level, and they're very different, right? An 18-year-old coming to college for the first time has fears around fitting in and navigating college work. A adult learner returning to school has very different fears that are probably very much the barrier to ever taking that first step. I think one of the challenges is, I think it's trying to integrate back into that sort of learning life, right? Whether it's the campus, whether it's the assignments and navigating that amongst, in some cases, a spouse and children and other life commitments and a job. The biggest, I think, and best advice that I oftentimes try to give to people who are considering it is to take the step and to begin to do it in a very, very sort of slow but deliberate fashion, right? Don't go and say, I want to get through this as fast as I can, so I'm going to start with 12 credits, because the chances are you're going to end up with working during the day and coming to school 4 nights a week. You're going to end up taking on way too much. Try and navigate and sort of dip a toe in. And that's one of the reasons why we really like a program like this, because it does allow some of those biggest barriers or burdens to be taken away. You're not going to have to come back to college and be sitting amongst, 18-year-olds and you say, I feel so out of place, because this is going to be cohort-based with people who are in a similar life position as you are. You're not going to have to worry about, I got to get there an hour early and find my parking spot and find the classroom. We're going to come to you. In some cases, we've actually even arranged, when we've done this, we have dinner catered in and everybody comes and you have dinner for the first half hour and then you start to kind of engage. And then you have the ability to really kind of have that much more personalized cohort base where you've got people who are all in a similar experience and all experiencing it together. So it's easier to find your place amongst 19 others in a classroom of 20, all who share that commonality of, I'm so tired, I just left work, it's Thursday night, it's 5 o'clock, and sort of understanding that, rather than the student that just came from their dorm room who had a 3-hour nap, who is ready to go at 5 o'clock, right? So I think all of those, I think, are helpful at getting you comfortable with the environment you're in, so that the learning just becomes much more transformational in a sense.
Thank you for those comments. And my question is around the comment you made, which I thought was excellent, in addressing, right, the healthcare shortage, staffing shortage, through elevating folks that are in the early stages of their healthcare journey. Perhaps there are, certified home health aides, CNAs, and so forth, and elevating them to become registered nurses and different credentials, right? And having different credentials. So my question is, what are the hurdles, right? What are challenges encouraging that transition, and what can employers do, right? What kind of environment can we create for those folks looking to make that transition?
So this is a great question. This is one of the things we see as a tremendous opportunity for us. So you oftentimes have people who are wonderful caregivers, right? Some of the very best. And anybody who's ever had a loved one in hospice or in a skilled nursing facility knows that some of those people who are at the entry level have the deepest love for their patients and are wonderful and treat them like they're their own parent, right? And it's this wonderful thing. What you find is that oftentimes those people would be wonderful to climb that ladder to a nurse or a nurse leader or the next level, a social worker or anything else. We've found that in speaking again with a lot of folks in the healthcare industry, some of the biggest barriers, one of them that people don't pay enough attention to, is language. Many of these folks struggle not with the caregiving skills, not with the understanding of what they need to do, but with navigating a college journey because they don't have English as a primary language, right? So we're actually taking a look at, we have a robust Hispanic center with programs that actually a number of them have won awards for being taught first exclusively in Spanish, then bilingually, and then translating with ESL support into English-only education through the associate's level journey. We're looking at how we adapt that programming to healthcare populations, because one of the things we feel strongly about is we could address this very well if we provide language support. The other piece is financial, right? And so a lot of this is also the mindset of building the ecosystem to include some of the healthcare providing entities like the hospitals and health systems. If these folks are employed at a health systems provide tuition remission, and usually a robust amount of it. And in fact, I remember talking to one HR leader who said, we can't give it away, right? We have available $10,000 a year for tuition remission for our employees, and nobody takes advantage. One of the things is if we structure it in a way where we integrate it into the workforce mix with education, then we have the tuition aspect covered as well. So if we've addressed the language barrier and some of the challenges with language learning, we've addressed the cost, and we've addressed this ability to sort of work and learn while you earn. All of that should close a lot of the barriers or gaps that oftentimes lead somebody to say, sure, I'd love to become a nurse, but I can't go back to school. I don't feel ready. I can't quit my job to do it. So what do? I'm sort of stuck here. And so if we can integrate this, I think we will address a lot of that challenge of upskilling very, very valuable employees who would be tremendous at the next level and in that hierarchy that we just can't get there.
Okay, thank you. And I think this is the last question for today.
Could you talk about the kind of the global picture in terms of education? I know that there are other education systems that are, doing extremely well, and I want to think about this in the lens again of finance, because I think our system is somewhat, skewed and is really doing a disservice to students, especially with our loan systems. And, like once you get hooked into that, you can never unwind that, bankruptcies, all of that. But I think maybe there's another way to look at this where maybe some other countries, other systems are doing it really well. Maybe the Northern European systems, I know, are always ranked as some of the top education systems in the world. If there was something that you could take from those systems and kind of impart into us to maybe directionally change how we value education, the cost of it, and, how our government kind of manages some of the loan systems, et cetera. I know there's a lot in there, but maybe pick one or two things that you think we can focus on here.
Yeah, it's an excellent point in that it feels like much like I would argue, much like our healthcare system, much like most of these sort of systems that are so entwined in one another, that we create this mess that seems to always be unable to manage cost and unable to manage in any way the burdens that are created as a result of someone stepping in and never being able to step out, right? It becomes, as you said, I take a loan and 50 years later, it's still hovering over my head, right? And you hear these stories of, people in their 40s and not able to start their lives because they're still paying $1,000 a month in college tuition back to Fannie Mae or one of these organizations. I would argue that there are certainly some, I think, as you said, within the European system, Australia, even Canada have better models, but a lot of them are much like the healthcare systems, more socialized, right? In a sense of much more of a public-based system. I think the challenge for us is we don't even have to look internationally. There are some exemplars in other states and regions that do this better than we do, right? I was down as part of this conference. I was also down in Florida looking at some of the ecosystem of higher education there. Now, Florida has a lot of things going on in the higher ed space that we don't want to emulate, right? That we've seen headlines around. But about 25 years ago, they made a concerted effort to build a state system that was a real state system that integrated K-12 into their 2-year institutions, into their 4-year state institutions, and created this sort of portability of you could start anywhere and end up anywhere. And the cost in state is $9,000 a year for anywhere in the UF system. That includes University of Florida, Central Florida, Southern Florida. Outside, I think out of state, I think the price is even competitive with our tuition at Rutgers and elsewhere. So we have a problem in that we've created this bloat and this unaffordability factor built in because we have no efficiencies. I've often said New Jersey's home rule challenge with, how we do K-12 and how we do all of our governance in a sense of 600 municipalities and all of this sort of independence, I think also creeps into the higher ed system to make it very unaffordable. And I think we need to address this, because if we don't address this, two things happen. First, we create this huge gap between students who have means and students that don't. And we also create this continued burden that students are carrying around in greater and greater volume of debt and this overwhelming inability to navigate that and start their lives, because so many of them can't earn at a level that even pays back the loan, let alone gets them ahead to start a life and start a family and buy a home, and all the things that we know just a generation ago were much more attainable for someone at 25 or 30 years old than they would be today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And we're going to close out the comments in a moment with Therese, from the Executive Director of the Monmouth Regional Chamber of Commerce. But I just want to share two words that I don't know if you hear them enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bring lightning. Yeah, thank you. Really, and all the folks that are watching, and this will be shared. Thousands of folks are going to see this video. You bring lightning in a bottle here. You really do. You bring lightning in a bottle. And when you bring it out in front in a podcast format where people can see it, you smash that bottle. It shines light all throughout the educational ecosystem. We're going to be seeing so much more about what you're doing and the great work that you're doing. So not surprised at all that you're partnering with Ralph Zucker and his team at Inspired, and right here meeting people where they are. And that's in addition to the partnerships you already have in the K-12 arena. You already have with talented leaders like David Stout and Brookdale Community College and other organizations. So really, it says so much that you're investing your time here and sharing your knowledge, and deciding I'm gonna educate the next generation, not just of students and parents and adult learners, but the presidents, on means and methods to advance their world so they can learn and grow. And sometimes they all have blind spots, right? And shining that light is so incredible. We thank you so much for being here for that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been wonderful, and we look forward to the opportunity to be here embedded in Monmouth County for a long time to come.
Yes, onward and upward. Therese, would you like to say a few words before we wrap up today?
Michael, thank you so much for opening up to us. I love your passion about what you're doing and the thoughts that you have, these advanced thoughts that you have. I trust you to take us to where we need to be and bring everybody along for the ride. So thank you for being a trailblazer. Thank you for that.
So much.
Yeah.
Yes. For folks,
I want to thank everybody for coming here. This was a great event, and thank you for your support and coming here and listening. And I also have to give a shout out to the Walls. Okay, Jeannie puts these events together, and I got to tell you, Terrence, you are the #1 host because you ask amazing questions that really pull great information.
I'm just hoping he's grading on a curve.
It's all good. You got an A+.
Thank you.
A+.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And folks, just remember all of these fantastic members of the Monmouth Regional Chamber of Commerce. If you're wondering what the gears are, the infrastructure that drives this organization, you're looking at all of them right here, in addition to more beyond what's here. The members that are going to be joining, the members that are here, the board that joins and supports Therese and her work. It's a fantastic Chamber of Commerce. Join it, get involved, and thank you again so much for your time. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and stay well, stay educated. Thank you. And Shared Universe Podcast coming at you.
We love a Shared Universe podcast, and Christian, thank you.